I saw her out there. Lynn McIntyre, not Lynn Riley, Lynn McIntyre. There was a Lynn.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we don't have any fun things to do tonight. It's a rare event when we don't have a proclamation or read or anything fun to do, so we're going to get right to the business. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Orleans. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Yes, Councilmember Price.
I just had a question about number 6.
I don't know whether we want to hold that for later or just go ahead and deal with it now. It was.
No, we'll need to pull it if we wish to discuss it. I don't have a problem pulling it, but.
All right, just move to extract item number 6 from the consent agenda.
We'll take item 6 off the consent agenda and add that to the transportation agenda. Any other questions or comments from the audience and council? We're voting on the consent agenda with the exception of number 6. All in favor, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Is there anything on the calendar to be deferred? Because if there's anybody here on an item to be deferred, I'd like to, that the council wishes to defer, I'd like to get those out of the way first. Everything's coming forward tonight. All right then, we'll call upon,
Thank you for asking.
We'll call upon Councilmember Kent Eigelhart, liaison to the Admin and Finance Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first item is approval of Code of Ordinance Amendment to Chapter 2, Section 2.14, Compensation of Elected Officials. And to start out, to make sure it's clear, this is not dealing with any of us up here, not changing any amounts that anyone makes. It's specific to our judge and how that position will be paid. And I'll let Mr. Fisher tell us about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Eigelhart. That is correct. This amendment to the ordinance will allow for the judge to be moved into a position where he can be paid on a per session rather than at a salary as they are now. The language will add that so that the compensation of the judge would be set by resolution by mayor and council, which is what's actually in the charter. So this would be the first reading of the amendment to the ordinance. After the second reading, if it all goes through, the resolution would be done at that particular time.
Are you recommending the staff recommending this change?
Oh, yes, sir.
Would you give us the rationale of staff for recommending this change?
Yes, sir. With the workload that we have in court services right now, a full-time paid per session judge can handle the amount of work that is in court services for a savings to the city in the cost. If there's if a judge can't be here, if the chief judge isn't here for some reason, there's a fill-in judge, the pay per session would be the same amount. So we wouldn't be paying a salary and then turning around and having to pay another judge to come and sit. And so there would be a savings of somewhere around $25,000, $30,000 a year.
So we're going to have the same service at a lower cost.
Yes, sir.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Price.
On a sheet that we were given that's marked C, and for fill-in judges, the amount is listed as 0. Does that mean that we are not expecting ever to have any substitute standby judges?
No, ma'am. That would be the cost for a fill-in judge, and there would be no cost because it would no added cost because it would be a per session. So if there's a judge that would have to fill in, if the elected judge was not able to be here, it would still be the same amount of money regardless of whether it was the chief judge here or whether it was a substitute judge.
But surely we have an estimate, like as far as vacation, training, the time that the main judge would not be here, because otherwise we're overestimating the amounts that would be paid out to FICA, Medicare, et cetera.
Ms. Love, you can respond to that question.
Yes, on the spreadsheet that you got that was Exhibit C, it's based on a calendar 4 the calendar year 2015 with 288 sessions, no matter who the judge is. So that would on average be 24 sessions per month. So that is the amount of, the per session amount, the FICA, Medicare, all the associated expenses for the chief judge or a fill-in judge for 288 sessions per year.
Okay, so FICA, Medicare, et cetera, would come out either way.
Correct.
Okay,
Not any medical, dental, life.
right, but the FICA and Medicare would be the same regardless.
Correct, 7.65%.
Okay. Then my other question is based on those pages, E, and I guess there's 3 pages of E. If you calculate that out, though, it looks like we're more at the rate of closer to 300 sessions, or, I don't know if we call them sessions or
Sessions, yes, ma'am.
sessions, yeah, per year. So that, I mean, it just comes out a little more, not a whole lot more, but I hate to see us underestimate, because I've sensed that as we get busier, there may be more sessions. So I just wondered why we were basing it on 23 or 24 sessions per month when it's likely to be higher.
What you see in the pages labeled as letter E is the actual historical from September of 2013. So they average out to 24.7 sessions per month. That can ebb and flow some. There are, as you mentioned, some training that we have, a week of training that we know we don't have court. We don't have some court in December when we get around the holiday periods. So there are some weeks that we don't have court that is figured in. I think between that one and the estimates of what the elected judges put in is somewhere around 272 or so sessions per year. Now that also includes any weekend sessions where he has to come in, where a judge would have to come in to see people that are in custody. So I think the average comes out about right on the estimate. I mean, we can, you can adjust an estimate a little ways one way or another, but through taking the historical that we've looked at and then looking at the organizational structure of what the chief judge has put in place, it looks like it should be fairly accurate.
So we would be treating the Saturdays the same as a weekly session?
If they have to come in, yes.
And what's the time involved on it?
It all depends on the number that's in there. So it's all these are budgeted numbers. It just depends on how many are there. And you don't ever really know that. It depends on whether they can bond out in time or whether they have to stay long enough to be able to have an appearance.
And is that 7 days a week or just Saturday?
It'll be on the weekend because they can only be held in custody for a certain length of time before they have to be brought before a judge. And we have court sessions at other parts of the week.
Okay, so if our caseload increases, what, we just come back with a budget amendment, or what would we do?
We would manage the court calendar. There is some capacity right now for additional cases. They're working pretty diligently with our software company to get a better count each session. We've had a glitch, golly, almost once a month where we've had some very large court sessions. We're trying not to do that. So I think through some good management and good efficiencies, we can have some capacity in the sessions that we have now. If in fact it got to the point to where we could not do that any longer, we would have to see if we could move sessions around, or I guess ultimately we could look for more money in a budget amendment if it got to that point. But there would be an awful lot of work coming through the courts at that point. There would be fines and fees that would be paid that would help cover that cost.
Are we taking A and B together, or? Are you doing them separately?
There is a ordinance, and then there'll be a resolution. So the first would be the reading of the ordinance and a vote on the
The
ordinance.
resolution
Resolution first.
won't
Pass
be
the
tonight.
ordinance, right.
This is just the ordinance.
This is an ordinance,
Resolution's in 2 weeks, so
yeah, this is an ordinance change, so it takes 2 readings, and we
Correct.
cannot pass a resolution based on the ordinance until the ordinance changes.
Correct.
so we're only bringing up one matter tonight on this.
Gotcha.
All right, any other questions of council? Mr. Davidson, if you'd read the ordinance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Chapter 2, Administration, to amend existing Section 2.1.4, Compensation of Elected Officials, and for other purposes. Now therefore, to accomplish the foregoing, the mayor and council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. Section 2.1.4 of the Roswell Code of Ordinances is hereby amended by deleting in its entirety the current Section 2.1.4 and substituting a new Section 2.1.4 to read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this would be the first reading.
Do we have a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance?
Move to approve the ordinance.
Motion by Councilmember Eichelhart. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
Well, I just want,
Thank you. I just want to be sure that if we're passing A, then I guess there's a presumption that we'd be passing B, or will there be totally separate discussion on B?
There will be a separate discussion on B. If B, you mean the
Well, I'm just-
resolution setting the salary. There'll be a separate vote and a separate discussion.
Well, I'm just wondering, because there are a number of people in the audience that may have interest in this topic for whatever reason that, a discussion of A and B may be appropriate this time, I don't know. It
If
seems
there are
like
any
we've-
questions or comments from the audience, we'll entertain them at this time. Any questions or comments from the audience? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
Just the one item in the paragraph on B, and I know we're not discussing B, but where it says all judges of the municipal court shall be permitted to devote time to other professions, including the practice of law, provided such profession does not conflict with the duties of chief judge or judge of the municipal court of Roswell. I guess my real question would be if, just because you're in the courtroom, is that the extent of your duties? Like, is there non-courtroom time that would still be considered part of the duties of the chief judge?
Mr. Fisher, can you respond to that question?
I don't know of any duties outside of what is handled here when they're on the premises or in the courtroom. I don't know if there'd be legal answers to other things that they would do from a judicial standpoint, but the judges are here to listen and hear cases within the court. I'm not aware of anything else that they do outside of the court.
Okay, because I know that there's some question from a number of people about whether or not a chief judge is permitted to practice law if this is a full-time position. And I guess the question hinges on whether or not this would be considered a full-time position and whether time outside the courtroom is considered part of the job or not.
I would defer that question to the definition of what a part-time versus full-time. It's a paid per session position, and outside of the courtroom, I'm not aware of any duties that they would have.
The way it currently reads is if he's not in court and not over here at City Hall, he can practice law.
He's paid per session, correct.
There are a number of ethical codes that apply to judges that go beyond what this city does. So he does, the chief judge and all our judges would have to comply with those rules of judicial ethics. But as far as whether it's the chief judge or the other fill-in judges, this does not limit their practice of law to serving at City Hall.
Correct.
So does this change the way we are characterizing the position of the judge in this city?
Mr. Davidson, do you believe this is a change in the ordinances as the way we characterize the judge?
It's not a change in the ordinance on how we characterize the judge. There was a budget amendment back in 2006, 2004, something like that, that made the judge. His compensation was based on full-time compensation. However, that budget amendment has been replaced by budget ordinances ever since, and they've not addressed it. So I know our current elected judge has talked to the JQC, which oversees judges throughout the state. They have said, if it doesn't say anything in your charter, doesn't say anything in the ordinance, you're free to practice. So he is in contact with them, and they're the determining body. So this just will clarify it. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Other questions? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to the first reading, raise your hands. Unanimous. This time we'll call upon Liaison and Community Development Department, Councilmember Becky Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first one on the agenda is PV 20140. 1064 205 West Crossville Road, the Providence Group. This item was deferred at the July 14, 2014 meeting. This could be presented by Mr. Townsend.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. This is a Parkway Village variance. The applicant is requesting to reduce the 150-foot or with a berm or 175-foot requirement for a non-single family large tract development over 7 acres that abuts the perimeter of the district that requires 150 with a berm or 175. This is for the northern area of the subject property. It's approximately 15.3 acres. The proposed development is for 92 townhomes. There's an approximate 6-acre lake on the subject property adjacent to Crossville Road. This is an aerial of the property showing the existing single-family home, the lake. The pink line is the Parkway Village boundary line.